we actually believe that next time round, it should be possible to avoid doing so much in the way of lockdowns. We actually think that what matters is to be able to identify people with disease, isolate them quickly, and then get them back into circulation as soon as they're free of the illness.
It's 3 years since we were all told to stay at home and lock down to help protect us all from a then unknown virus called COVID-19.
The time has now come for us all to do more. From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
Well, we know that future pandemics are inevitable, but how prepared are we to tackle the next one? Let's talk to one of the people who regularly appeared on Times Radio during the lockdown days. David Nabarro is the World Health Organization's Special Envoy. Good morning, David.
Good morning to you. Lovely to be back and connected.
It is great to speak to you. Now, let's look ahead, shall we, first of all?
Yes.
How prepared is the WHO? How prepared are governments around the world for the next pandemic?
Well, WHO actually invests an awful lot of resources in constantly keeping a lookout for what's coming. They scour the world for information that suggests there might be something new afoot. About 5,000 signals are looked at each month, and every day there are one or two that are followed up on. It's part of the job. We call it health intelligence. Whether governments are as prepared as WHO, well, that's a different matter. Of course, the WHO is required to do this. That's one of the things it's paid to do. But governments have so many other things that they're competing for resources. We actually believe the world's much better prepared now than it was before COVID. And we are working with governments everywhere on a new treaty to make certain that we're even better as a world in dealing with whatever comes. And we've got work to do, because I really do feel that the level of suffering as a result of COVID could have been a lot less if we'd managed to work better together from the beginning.
Well, let's come back to that in a moment, because I'm really interested in this notion of how much better we are prepared, because we talked to Tom Whipple yesterday, the Times' science editor. There's a feeling, David, that actually the grief caused by the responses to COVID, we're just talking about the damage of locking down schools, the culture war that has followed on from that actually means that we are more divided when it comes to health measures now than we were 3 years ago. And if a pandemic happened tomorrow, actually there'd be less likelihood of consensus than there was 3 years ago. Are you concerned that the culture war effectively makes the treatment of the next pandemic more difficult?
Well, I must say that one of the real challenges of COVID was that there were a lot of uncertainties about it right from the start. How lethal is it? How's it transmitted? What's the best way to avoid it? How should we organize, test, trace, and isolate? How should we get the vaccinations out? And should we do it in a way that's balanced across the whole world? Or does the rich world look after itself first and then look after the poor world second? All these issues have actually been really tricky. And you're absolutely right. I think they've led to masses of debate. Most of that debate's pretty healthy. A few have become rather rancorous. But in general, I would say yes, that the political interplay around the uncertainties is something that it needs to be dealt with. I'm just refusing to believe, quite honestly, that humanity would be so needing to have constant political battles that you don't get investment in what really matters, which is what's needed to keep people safe. One other thing, and that is that we actually believe that next time round, it should be possible to avoid doing so much in the way of lockdowns. We actually think that what matters is to be able to identify people with disease, isolate them quickly, and then get them back into circulation as soon as they're free of the illness. And that's how you stop big surges from developing. And that fashion of being able to test, trace, and isolate, something that became quite a buzzword in the UK, is something that we want to see still kept in place and still put in practice, because if you get that right, you can avoid lockdowns.
And lockdowns are a failure, aren't they? Let's be absolutely clear.
I think so. They are a failure.
They might be a necessary failure. And you know, you look back on it, not locking down schools is going to have a very deleterious effect on all sorts of people for a very long time. That feels like something that wasn't necessarily done right, perhaps.
Well, there are two things. First of all, you lock down as a last resort. What you really need is to have systems in place so that you can find people who are ill and get them isolated and treated if you've got treatment. That basic requirement should avoid the necessity for these massive lockdowns. Secondly, I want to stress that if we can do so, we should also try to make sure that people are the heroes of the response rather than needing to be controlled. In all my experience of dealing with numerous diseases like COVID, in the end, it's the people who are the solution, the virus is the problem. And partnership with the people and leadership by example, authentic leadership that really convinces people that government and other authorities are on their side is what's really done best in COVID. And I hope we'll be able to see it again. And by the way, I don't think people will go on saying that they're fed up with all this and wish that they could talk about something else. I think that the damage of COVID, with more than 6 million people dying, is so serious that actually, for the good of all of us, we do need to be able to talk about it and even to grieve about what it did to our society and our families.
And just finally, before you go, do we know where it came from?
I wish. Oh, I wish. Do you know, I've been involved in so many of these kinds of situations. You very rarely know the actual cause, and you just have to try to find all possible options and do everything you can to make sure it doesn't happen again. So I'm afraid I just can't answer that question, and nor can anybody in the World Health Organization. In the end, we rely on governments, we rely on scientists, we rely on everybody to be sharing with WHO what they know. And of course, there are often very good reasons why they hold back.
Yeah, so that could be one of the mysteries that people keep
I'm
debating.
afraid so.
David, great to speak to you. Real pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That's
And
David
good day,
Nabarro, the
everybody.
World Health Organization Special Envoy.
And if you like that,
You can listen to us.
we're sticking asthma. Have you forgotten?
Well done. Every Monday to Thursday on Times Radio Breakfast.